Though long dead, the remnants of the Orokin Empire persist to this day, offering immense power to those who can unlock their secrets. But who were the Orokin? Who were the executors who carried out their will? And who was Ballas, the man who seems to have a direct connection to the Tenno and Margulis? First, it is important to break down the hierarchy of the Orokin Empire. The Empire did not consist entirely of what would be considered Orokin. Instead, it was divided into two very distinct castes, the Orokin and the humans. And below even them were the Grineer slaves and labor forces of the Orokin, but I won't be covering them in this video to any major extent. The Orokin were comprised of the Congress of Executors, the non-distinct Orokin elite, the 7 emperors, potentially the Dax, and potentially the Sectaris, though the latter two could simply have been elite humans. The Congress of Executors maintained the will of the emperors throughout the sprawling empire. The Dax stood as elite guardsmen for the Orokin, and could have potentially been involved in training the Tenno. The Sectaris were essentially aides to the Orokin elite, and may have been mortal but privileged to move about the empire unimpeded. The Orokin, while technically humans themselves, possessed numerous traits that set them apart from the lesser humans. Firstly, they boasted an unparalleled physical beauty, so much so that it could be an illusion or result of some other source, as Orden Karis remarks that their beauty is nearly impossible to fathom. Secondly, they were functionally immortal. It is important to understand that while they were immortal, they were not invincible. They simply never aged or grew sick, but as seen with the slaughter at the Terminus and the murder of Avantus by Veitok, they were very much susceptible to standard attacks. Now, that being said, there is still some confusion about their mortality. While they can be killed, it would seem that they can rise again. Ballas and the Orokin at Orden Karis' absolution ceremony seem unperturbed by his attacks, and Ballas claims that "we have died 100 times, which would indicate reincarnation or some sort of consciousness transfer. However, judging from the effects it has on Orden Karis, it would seem that the red liquid allows for mind transference, as after drinking it, he becomes the Ordis we now know. If the latter is the case, it is a valid theory that the bodies of the Orokin are replicants of a sort, hence their perfect physical nature. However, their immortality seems to be the result of consumption of the red liquid. How a red liquid facilitates immortality is not yet clear, but will likely become more apparent in the war with Inquest. Regardless, it still raises question about Avantus' death, and if that was truly her end. It is also unclear if this red liquid is separate from Oro, or a way for non-Tenno to gain in Oro, hence why the Emperors were still able to be killed with finality by the Tenno, since Tenno can absorb the Oro of others. Below the Orokin was the rest of humanity. Composed of dignitaries and lower classes, there seems to be an immense gaps between those favored by the Orokin and those who were not. While some, like the Archimedeans, were closely involved with the Orokin elite and their projects, most of the system was not. As seen in the Inaros quest, those who were not directly subservient to the Orokin elite were almost completely unaware of their existence and hierarchy. The people of Mars and Phobos even went so far as to call them Skymen, indicating a medieval mindset and complete ignorance to space travel. Although it is potentially possible that these primitive terms only arose from the most recent civilization of Mars post-collapse, as generations of storytelling have distorted the truth of the legend. Regardless, how far this level of submission was spread across the Empire is uncertain, and could very well have included all but the most privileged of humanity. This level of submission was enforced by locking all high-functioning Orokin technology behind genetic barriers. Only those of Orokin status, or potentially those who had the Orokin's blessing, could operate the technology with ease. This massive barrier to entry is demonstrated when Bilsa is nearly killed for her genetic data to operate the solar rails. It is due to this complication that the understanding of Orokin technology in the modern day is limited at best, with only the Corpus coming even close to operating it, due in part to their intense reverence of Orokin reliquary, and also due to their potential ties to Orokin ancestry. While the Orokin were efficient in touting the value of their enhanced DNA, they were still human within. Because, as we have learned, the Orokin were still very much victims to the longings of the flesh. Ballas, one of the Executorial Congress, was romantically involved with Margulis, an Archimedean of human status. Judging from his comments that lust was his sin, it would indicate that intermingling between humans and the Orokin was somewhat taboo. It is very possible that when Margulis became a threat to the Empire's Tenno program, his allegiance was called into question, and he was forced to execute her as a show of fealty. Beyond just the Orokin elite and the humans of the system, there is a very important class to remember: the Seven. The Seven are not the operating Congress of Executors, which may have had more than 7 members, but only convened in groups of 7 for judgmental purposes. The Seven are the silent emperors of the Orokin Empire. Though not confirmed in-game yet, it was hinted by Mike Brennan that the Seven maintained their vigil over the Empire within isolated pods. sealed so that they would not have to share air with those of lesser standing, silent so that only the most privileged of the elite could hear their gilded words. It is due to this hermetic nature that the Congress of Executors was founded, a group that could maintain the Emperor's will without the Emperors themselves needing to get involved. It is also possible that these emperors each embodied one of the 7 principles, and eventually stood as symbolic figureheads for the Tenno schools. This tie to the Tenno's beliefs and principles could be why they were willing to descend from their lofty thrones for the absolution ceremony at the terminus, and to their own demise. But before its collapse, the Orokin Empire had a long, expansive history. While it is not clear the exact duration of the empire, it seems to have been divided into 4 or more eras: Lith, Meso, Neo, and Axi in that order. Now, while these eras have been named, it is very likely that these were only small periods towards the end of the Empire, as all relics from those eras are run on the principles of void energy, indicating that the eras transpired after the Orokin learned how to master the void. It is due to this mastery that they evolved from a science-driven race to one that valued art and majesty, treasuring the form as much as the function, as demonstrated by the increasing ornateness of the various relics. Regardless, the Orokin spent decades, if not centuries, reshaping the system into its current form. Twisting and experimenting with flora, fauna, and reality itself at their whim, they terraformed much of the system, vastly improved space travel via the use of solar rails, and also poisoned the Earth beyond recognition. As seen in the Silver Grove quest, literally no natural flora or fauna exist in the system any longer, as all has come as a result of Orokin engineering. Most of this was likely done to rectify the ravaging of the Earth in an attempt to restore it to a semblance of its former self. While it is not clear how the Earth was poisoned, it is likely as a result of technocyte experimentation, which brings into question the timeline of events and the duration of the Old War. Seen as Margulis longs for Old Earth, it would seem that the Earth was overrun sometime early in her life, or possibly even before it, indicating that the Old War transpired over a great period of time, as technocyte was potentially developed as a tool to counter the sentient threat. A thought that is further backed by the rich history of the Tenno and their culture that would have needed much time to mature. All of this time allowed the immortal god emperors of the Orokin to wallow in their own pride, toying with the lives of the system as if they were merely tools. This hubris is, of course, what led to their own downfall, as all their massive ventures in Blaine God backfired. Grineer, Tenno, Sentient, Technocyte, and even their own genetic pride culminated into a massive wave of chaos that tore their empire apart from within. This event, known as the Collapse, is still casting waves to this day, and the whispers of the Empire continue to instill fear and greed into the system's ruling powers. But the most burning question is, are any of the Orokin still alive? It is very possible that some of the Orokin elite managed to elude the Grineer and the dangers of the system for all these years. The furtive Olmedi is a likely candidate, and with all the hints of Ballas and his ties to the Tenno, his existence is very possible as well. But as with many things in the Warframe universe, these are mostly uncertain and are not the only interpretations. But until the time comes when we have all the facts, this is what we know.